because the original design is a total death trap. It's perfect. In my opinion, supercars really reached their peak in the 2000s, because that was the time where you could still generally buy a car with a manual transmission and big, naturally aspirated V12s, as I think a supercar should be. The trouble is, nowadays, all those cars that I've dreamed of are really, really expensive. And frankly, out of my reach. But I still want them. So that leaves me two options. Figure out how to make absurd amounts of money, or I have to build one. And that is not a reasonable option. However, I do have a lot of tools in a shop and a general scrappy know-how. And here in the past, with my YouTube channel, through the exposure and what we're doing with Gina's Garage and all, I got approached by Avalon King to be part of my YouTube channel. And it was nice, and I enjoyed the product and kind of started a relationship. And there was one day where they were thinking about ideas and exploring different ideas with the car community and how they can get out there. And the idea of a promo vehicle came up. And they were thinking of things like maybe like a Fiero or something and building some crazy thing. I don't know what happened in between my ears somewhere. I go, I've got an idea. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but you should totally get behind this and fund my insane idea. And they were like, okay. So I told them what I thought I could do this for, which was an absurdly low number that no reasonable human being on planet Earth would think you can do this for. And my idea, of which I'm not even going to tell you, was I'm going to build my own V12 supercar the way it should be, but I'm going to do it for less than $20,000 altogether. Totally doable. Except I don't want my V12 supercar to be as simple and ordinaire as a Ferrari or Lamborghini production vehicle. So I thought back to what is the most avant-garde design ever. And that has to be the Bertone Stratos Zero. The Lancia Stratos is the car that was super famous for rally racing and all. It's an amazing, evocative car with the Ferrari Dino V6 in the back, transversely mounted, and we love it. Those cars are also untouchable in terms of collectability. But the car that inspired it was something that a lot of people have since forgotten. It was basically, if you took a Lancia Stratos and cut off the entire roof and all the windows and welded the doors shut and just like put a roof on it and had no doors, that's what this is. The original car was 33 inches high and was basically a doorstop. It was impossible to have doors in this thing, so they just had the windshield fold open and you laid down in the car. In fact, when you folded the windshield open, the steering wheel would come up like this. So you'd lay down in this car like this, grab the steering wheel, pull it down, and the windshield would close. Probably horrific visibility. Now this car was done, if I recall the story correctly, because Bertone wanted to build a car for Lancia. So they built this thing using a little Lancia Fulvia V4 engine out of a front-wheel drive Fulvia, and put it in mid-engine, built this goofy little prototype really quickly, and as the story goes, drove it under the gate of the Lancia headquarters and showed up and be like, here's your new car. Well, created a sensation. It was a huge stir at like Geneva Motor Shows and all, and became, honestly, the craziest design of the 20th century. Later, even in the 1980s, and this is kind of insane, was featured in the Michael Jackson film Moonwalker. And apparently there were two fiberglass bodies made to replicate this prototype where Michael Jackson like turns into a car and then like zooms away and escapes some bad guys and morphs back. And those bodies since disappeared. And the only reason I know about this is because years ago when I was in college, I was surfing the internet for things for sale and I found this Stratos Zero like replica fiberglass body on this terrible chassis for sale for $17,000 at a dealership in Florida. And I wanted it so badly and I couldn't sell it, I didn't have enough money. I couldn't do it no matter what, and I kicked myself so hard. But it stuck with me that someday I've got to have this car. I don't know why, it just stuck with me. And for whatever crazy reason, I'm like, yeah, I'm not gonna do a commercial for Avalon King. I'm gonna build my own supercar that looks like that, but I'm not putting a 4-cylinder, I'm putting in a V12. So, as you do, I've been wanting to do coach building and aluminum panel beating and English wheels and plenishing hammers with steel and stuff. And I just thought about it for a while. I'm like, you know, I could get a Porsche Boxer that's junk and sell everything and just keep the suspension and like parts of the bulkheads, and I'll have a great transaxle. Because if you want to buy a transaxle off the shelf, those things are like 10 grand. But I can go out and buy a crappy Porsche Boxster for $2,000, sell the wheels and everything I don't need, recoup most of the money, if not all, and have a few $100 in all the suspension, the chassis, and the transaxle, and a title. Come on. And then it's just going to be a modified vehicle from there. So I found out that the BMW M70 V12 engine used in the 750 ILs as well as the 850 CIs, which is like the one cool two-door BMW you can get still with a stick shift if you can find one, is a pretty good motor. So then naturally I found a down on its luck BMW 750 four-door with the V12 in it that I bought running and driving for $1,300. Yes! So I bought this thing in Chicago and towed it back. And somebody wants to buy the rolling chassis for $1,000, which means I'll have $300 in a running V12 BMW engine and wiring harness. And I know this is genius. So the kit car builder guys that want to build like Diablo replicas and stuff, I found a guy in the United States through social media who builds an adapter plate to take the M70 V12 engine and adapts it to a Porsche Boxster transaxle. Perfect. So then from there, I'm like, I gotta get wheels for this thing. It kind of looks similar. But in studying this, the original prototype was tiny. And I'm like, well, I guess if I cut the Boxster chassis and shrink it and put it together, maybe it'll fit the wheelbase. But then suddenly I had an aha moment. I'm like, don't build an exact replica, you idiot. You can just, it's the design you like. It's the basic feel of what that was back then. Don't make a replica of some stupid spindly prototype. Make the production version of the most avant-garde car there ever was that didn't exist that should. And I realized if I scale the original design by like 8.9%, the wheelbase will exactly match that of a Porsche Boxster. And Porsches have a weird bolt pattern. It's like 5x130, which you can't get aftermarket wheels for easily unless you want to spend a fortune, and I'm cheap. So what I did was I found that if I get some aftermarket three-piece Gotti wheels that would have been used on like a wide-body Porsche 911 that people think is kind of distasteful now and they want to go back to like factory Porsche wheels. So I went on eBay and I found a set of these in 16-inch wheels, which is just big enough to fit over the Porsche Boxster brake rotors and with the offset. So for $1,600, I was able to get a set of three-piece Gotti wheels, 5-spoke, that are period correct for the whole design I'm going for and fit the Porsche bolt pattern and fit over the brakes and came with good tires. Which, interesting enough, if you bring it up 8.9% on the scale with the offset when you just bolt it on, exactly matches the track width, front and rear, to what the original design was. So boom, all I got to do is scale it up like 8.99%. And the chassis works, the suspension works, this all works. The other reason I had to pick this crappy old Porsche Boxster is Mcpherson Suspension, which is very, very important because the original design is a total death trap. It's perfect. You lay down in it and your feet end up being slightly farther ahead than the leading edge of the tire. And so naturally you and the passenger sit between the suspension with your leg going over top of the steering rack. And naturally the steering wheel's like right here. You're sitting on the steering rack well, laying down. So you have to have the Mcpherson suspension because if you have an upper wishbone, there would be no room for your legs. And so they haven't tried to kill me yet, although there's been a couple of phone calls like, what do you think you're doing? But I think they're reasonably cool with it now. Maybe if for no other reason than this is basically like watching a crazy person in a fish tank. And that sort of amuses them. And nothing has gone badly so far. So it's actually going really well. The V12 engine is in, it's mounted to the transaxle. It's insane how well it fits. I was actually able to cut the bulkheads that initially would have been the firewall in front of the flat six engine in the Porsche and then weld in to have polyurethane motor mounts to the V12. And it's brilliant because you got this giant engine that normally wouldn't fit, but since the driver sits insanely far forward, there's enough room to make it work. And the thing I love so much about this is it's totally old school. There's no directions, there's no CAD programs, nothing like that. The only CAD program I'm using is cardboard aided design. But how you get the shape, this is the old school magic, a projector. I begged my father and mother-in-law to let me borrow their movie projector. And so they brought that along and I hooked it up to my computer and took pictures of the original design and like a drawing from a model. And I just projected it in full size on the wall. And I was originally gonna have this like sign printing shop blow up the drawings to the size I want and print them out, but they wanted like better part of $1,000. I'm like, forget that, just give me a roll of paper. So I taped it to the side of the wall and I blew up the whole car on the side of the wall. And then I just measured the wheelbase to what the Boxster was, exactly where it was, and got it right and just traced it out. I swear to you, I just traced it out. And It's no different than when I was in high school doing like an old school like engineering drawing class, like with a T-square and all. But it's giant and full size. So I got a side, I got a cutaway, I got a front, I got a rear, I got a top. And what I've done is basically given myself a map to the Cartesian plane, like X, Y, and Z axes. So I build the chassis of the car with all the running gear in it and the basis of the interior, the steering wheel, the seating position, the radio, the fuel cell, the battery, the pedals, everything. Just make sure all that fits within the wheelbase that I ultimately want my supercar to be, and that everything I'm doing fits within inside of what the skin will be. And from there, once the chassis is done running and driving, I'll simply take these giant blueprints that I'm not sure where in the shop I'm gonna put them because they're the size of a full-size car, so I can only see it. And then I can take the points in space and make a wireframe buck, like the Italians did back in the 50s when they were making Ferraris quickly. I don't have to make a wood buck like the English. I'm only gonna make one of these. So I'll literally make a wireframe buck of all the edges, and from there I can take thin steel and just gently roll it on an English wheel or hit it with a plenishing hammer to get a compound curve and TIG weld the whole thing together. I think it's gonna work. I've never done this, but I appreciate Avalon King for supporting the insanity that all of this is the car community. I just found out that they actually supported another gentleman getting a dyno. So I think it's so amazing that a company that sells a product that frankly makes your car gorgeous and easier to clean is actually as much or more into being part of the whole community than just the black and white of doing business. And at the very least, they're letting me be an insane person and chase this dream. Not mad yet. So I think I just need to get it done and look really, really good.
We'd like to thank Avalon King for their continued support of the VINwiki YouTube channel. From crazy projects like Casey's King Zero to shooting derelict AMG cars off of a cliff in Alaska, they're interested in a whole lot more with respect to the automotive hobby than just making our cars look great. But the ceramic coating is awesome, and you can get it for $25 off at the link in the description below. So be sure to check it out, try it on your car, let us know what you think in the comments, and let them continue to support idiots like us.